Welcome to the second part of the short series of videos I'm preparing on Christian meditation. In the first one I talked a little bit about the history of this and a little bit about posture, really, how you sit, how you make sure that you are comfortable in a position that you can hold for many minutes. Most of us are used to sitting in a way that allows us to be comfortable in the moment, and if we have to adjust our position in 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes time, that really doesn't matter. But for Christian meditation, or any form of meditation really, but Christian meditation I'm talking about, you need to be able to hold a posture for an extended period. So if you haven't watched that bit of the video yet, I would encourage you to do so, because I will be taking it for granted that you've understood what I was saying in that one. In today's video, I will talk a little bit more about the process of meditation. Once you've sat down, as I described, what do you then do with your eyes? Some people meditate quite competently, I suppose, with their eyes shut. But if you are at all tired or inclined to drowsy, or it's a bit too warm in the room, when you shut your eyes, for many of us there is a temptation to simply go to sleep. Don't beat yourself up if you do fall asleep. Your body obviously needs it. But there are things you can do to try and help yourself a little bit. So some people will have something to focus on while they are meditating. Might be a lit candle, might be a cross of some sort. Here's a very traditional crucifix with the figure of Christ on the cross. You may want to meditate on that. Or here is the much plainer palm cross that we had for last Palm Sunday. And that's probably what I will use today. There is nothing wrong or right about any of these options. They are simply what's going to work for you, and what's going to work for you in the reading that you are concentrating on. So when we pick up our Bible, there are obviously a lot of readings in here, some of which will appear on Sunday mornings, and there will be the reading that is either chosen by the lectionary, if your church uses one, or by the minister or pastor. If your church does not use the lectionary, they will have chosen 1, 2, 3 passages from the Bible to be read out, and then they will talk about them. And they will be trying to give you a sermon that takes those readings and in some way makes them relevant to your life today, tries to make them something that will help you on the decisions you'll have to make in the week to come. And in doing so, they may go and get a commentary, or more than one commentary, to help them understand the passages. And what they will be taking initially is very much a sort of intellectual approach to them. They will pick a passage, and here's one that's quite often used at christenings or baptisms, or thanksgiving for the birth of a child. Some people brought children to Jesus for him to place his hands on them, but the disciples scolded the people. When Jesus noticed this, he was angry and said to the disciples, "Let the little children come to me and do not stop them, because the kingdom of God belongs to such as these. I assure you that whoever does not receive the kingdom of God like a child will never enter it." And then he took the child in his arms, placed his hands upon them, and blessed them. So on a Sunday morning, if you're having that sort of reading, the person giving the sermon, as I say, might have picked up a commentary. They might have looked at it, and this is from Mark's Gospel, they might have looked at where this short passage we've just heard fits in with the structure of Mark's Gospel. They might have looked at the status of children in the world that Jesus and his disciples inhabited. When Jesus is saying children are important, is that an unusual thing to be saying in that culture or a very normal thing. They might look at that. They might get a more advanced commentary and where it talks about Jesus being angry with his disciples. What word does the Greek say for angry, and what does that mean in that context? You might look at what else Jesus says about the kingdom of God through Mark's gospel and maybe in the other gospels, and try and make sense of this. As I say, it's quite an intellectual approach. It's about understanding this short passage in the context of the book that Mark wrote. It's about understanding some of the words he used. It's about understanding the cultural issues that would be going on when Jesus and his disciples were around, and how those have changed. And then using all that might produce a conclusion of how you should deal with the next child you encounter in your life, or the next parent and child you encounter in your life, and give you some advice on how to do that. As I say, it's largely an intellectual approach. Meditation is a very different approach. It's not so much about understanding what this passage said at the time on an intellectual level. It's about letting God speak to you through this passage. And traditionally there's a process that the Benedictines used. I'll do this in more detail in another video. But basically you're reading this passage slowly and carefully and seeing if there's a word or a phrase that stands out to you, and then meditating on that phrase and seeing if that narrows down at all to a shorter phrase or a word perhaps, and then meditating on that word and then seeing if something comes to mind as to why God has maybe directed your mind to focus on that word among the many in the passage. A longer passage will even have even more words. And then meditating on why God may have drawn that short phrase or word to your attention and what it can mean in your life today. And it can be completely disconnected with the point of the original reading. In a passage like this, it could be that your mind focuses on the word children, and you think about how your church is welcoming children on a Sunday morning. Whether your church is good at that or bad at that, I think that's a perfectly valid question. You may focus on the word blessed and think about how your life generally, how you generally can be a blessing to the world around you, to the community you live in the time that you live in. It may be drawn into the kingdom of God and what you think that means in today's world. And what you're reflecting on may link very strongly to the original intent of this passage, or it may be completely disconnected. It may be that a word stands out in a passage like this and it makes you think of someone in your social circle who, with hindsight, perhaps you have neglected, and you're drawn to engage with them, to phone them up, to visit them, and perhaps discover that they've got some issue that you weren't aware of. So God can speak to you through a passage like this in a way that is completely disconnected from an intellectual understanding of this passage, and that's not necessarily the wrong thing. But as I say, the part of it is when you're starting with a passage like this, is to make sure you're sat in a way that can be physically sustained, and that you have a way of focusing your attention so the space around you does not distract you from what you're trying to do. And so sometimes having something like a cross to focus on, or a candle, or an image, depends on your tradition, gives you something to look at, as opposed to just sitting here and letting your eyes slowly move around the room and think, oh, what's that I see over there? I'll go and have a look at that and see if I can make sense of it. Or, oh look, there's something I should be doing. and getting distracted away from the purpose you are here for. Meditation is all about gaining focus and using that focus. And so you need to work out what will help you focus in the space in which you will be trying to meditate.